Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Every Woman. I'm Paige Monet, your host for tonight. And tonight's episode is all about something that hits home for so many of us. Our bodies, our choices. We're talking real, unfiltered truths about women's rights right here and where we go from here. So let's get into it because this is a conversation we need to have. And today on the couch with me, I have April and Kendall. Hey ladies, can you introduce yourself and tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Okay, so I am April Johnson. I am born and raised Brooklyn, New York. I am been in Delaware now for about 14 years. My football team of choice is Pittsburgh Steelers. I just got to put that out there early, like no disclaimer, like no, I'm only kidding. But that is my football team. But I am a grandmother of 3 beautiful granddaughters, and I am so interested in having this conversation, trying to figure out, where do we go from here? Like, what is that course? What am I fighting for? And how hard am I going to have to fight to make sure that they are going to be okay? Mm-hmm. So that is my journey and my reason why I'm here today.
And I am Kendall Bassett. I am an education advocate and a mom of 2 boys, teen boys. One's in college, one's still in high school. And this is important to me because not just of them, but because of all the kids that are in the schools that I advocate for, many of them girls. And they're going to be in this country where things have changed. And it might be different than what it was for me and for you and all of you growing up. And so I was really keyed on having this conversation when I was asked to be here. So thanks all for being here and letting me be here too.
Yes, thank you all for being here tonight. So as we dive in, we're going to do this conversation a little bit differently. It will be a more intimate conversation, so you guys will all have a chance to speak your truth, any stories, concerns, anything you want to talk about tonight. This is a safe space for us all. So I just want to, before we dive in, just give a few facts. So under these new 2025 policies under our new administration coming up, the government is trying to cut funding to organizations like Planned Parenthood, which provides essential health care for women, including young women, and giving out resources like birth control, STI testing, cancer screenings, wellness exams, and all of those type of things. So question, I know like all you guys are probably all different ages here. How many of you guys are over 40 or younger than 30? Okay. Oh, over 40. I'm sorry.
Over 40. You said over 40.
Okay, and then younger than 30, or younger than 35, I should say. Okay. Yay. Okay. So I feel like the funding Planned Parenthood will hurt a lot of like vulnerable women, especially young women, who may not have many options for like affordable health care. So my question to you guys is, if access to contraceptives disappear, or even like access to abortions, things like that, how can we expect young women to make empowered decisions? That's for everyone.
Well, so I just want to make sure we're all clear. So this is not going to necessarily affect Delaware, right? We have incredible legislators that have done work in our state to make sure that our women are protected and that our rights are protected. But if they defunded Planned Parenthood,
Right.
that actually could affect our state, not in this like it's all going to go away kind of piece, but they do get federal funding, right? And funding allows us to do the work that we need to do. Planned Parenthood is about health care,
right?
And we need to make sure that our constituents, the people that live here, have access to health care and good health care. When you lose funding, that can affect what you get.
Right.
So,
and that's for women of all ages.
it's women of all ages.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah. So I see. Yes. Can we pass the mic down, please?
I personally think that we have given so much control to the government. Education about our body begins at home.
Right.
As a mother, a grandmother, auntie, cousin, female, we need to teach our girls about their body. Yeah. Mama's job. We cannot be separating people to have a conversation with our daughters about what goes on with their body. as a nurse practitioner, I teach girls about their body as a provider. When parents step out of the room, I'm talking to young girls and young men bodies. So we cannot leave it in the hands of lawmakers to talk to our children about their bodies. And no.
Right.
My daughter knows that she has a vagina. It's not a pity pad or whatever. My son knows that he has a penis. And what happens with it, and like they have a breast. So I have daughters and sons, and I show them my looks, what happens, where children come from, what is a condom, what is you, what is chlamydia, what is herpes, what is HIV. Before they were collecting, they knew what that was, STIs, all of that, and what happens and what's treatable and what's not.
Right.
So it starts at home with mother and father, even when they're teenagers. When you're a teenager or like when you're young, what happens? Right. So I think that's the problem. We have to start at home. Right.
Yeah, but so can I follow up on that, right? Like, so that's great. I appreciate that. I do think that we do need to do that education at home. But we also have to remember that not everybody's a nurse practitioner, right? And many women, we do have women that have babies early, and they're babies with baby, right? Like, so they don't have that information. So there's got to be all of it, right? So as an education advocate, I don't believe that we should legislate how we educate. It's my personal opinion. However, I do believe that we need to have space for that education to happen. And Senator Poore, that's been on this couch before, actually worked on a bill about 5 years ago to make sure that all children grades 7 through 12 learn what consent is, right? So, because we might not have that information at home to give to our kids, we got to have somebody that's helping, right?
Yeah.
So
I would agree with that, and I absolutely love what you said, right? And it's crazy because before we started this conversation this evening, I literally said to them, I said, oh my God, I can remember when I was young and I was in school, you know, in Brooklyn, New York, and we were introduced to sex education. Like, I'm not sure, you know, in Delaware, like, or where you guys come from or whatever, if that was a thing here, right? But where we came from, we understood what a penis was, or what the female, you know, anatomy was, what the vagina looked like. They were teaching us how to put condoms on penis when we were in school. And I was devastated. I was like, wait a minute, you know, and then when you go home and you're like, Mom, you know, you ask those questions. Now your parents is like, wait, what? Right? Because back then the education system was different, right? And parents weren't that involved in the curriculums that were being taught until these things became very hard conversations to have when your kids came home. And I can remember a group of parents coming up to school going, yeah, no, not my kid. I don't want my kid in that class, right? And now we had a voice. Now we were in there, we were making noise. And I can remember the curriculum changing, you know, and it kind of quieting and dumbing down the information, you know, to make it easier digestible for the kids, and then less uncomfortable when the kids went home to have those conversations with their parents, right? Yeah. I think, and I agree on both sides, I think that those conversations should be happening at home, but I also agree that they should be happening in the school, because you're correct too, right? Everybody doesn't have the background that you have, right? I'm not a nurse practitioner. I am an avid reader, right? And I read and I understand and I know how things work, right? And when in those things, and I want to be able to teach them. Well, I did. I taught them to my children, and now I'm reliving it again, teaching it to my grandchildren. You know, so.
And I'm saying I'm a nurse practitioner, but what I was saying is I was a teenage mother. So
yeah,
I taught my children before I was even a nurse about sex, because I was a teenage mother.
Right.
So now that I am a nurse practitioner, my teenage mothers, I teach them about, you need to have a conversation with your children young to prevent our history.
Right. Yes.
So
I appreciate
that's
that.
the platform that I use as a nurse practitioner.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Oh, yeah, I think that sex education is important no matter where it comes from. I think that it's needed, but I don't think that it's like a solution, or I don't think that's going to solve a problem. I think that people, when you're younger, and even when you're older, right, you use sex as a way to cope with something, right? You use sex as a way to get away from something. You use sex as a way to get away from your family, to feel love, to feel something, right? And so instead of being so advocate on, where the education is coming from, as a woman, knowing your body and understanding how it works and how it moves, and like, as a woman, I think it's important for us to be okay with our sexuality. Like, it is a really fun thing to be a woman, right? Like, we move in ways that is like, it's phenomenal, right? And so if we learn to just not use our bodies as a disposable thing, right? Like, I think that we take our bodies for granted, right? And we are reckless with it. We give it to men and women who don't deserve it. We use it as a tool to feel accepted or loved or wanted, or we weaponize it so that we can get something, right? But I think that if we change the narrative, like, I have 3 children, and my oldest is 19, and I'm pretty sure he's still a virgin, which for me, that's like a win, right? Like, that's a win for me, but I think that the narrative is different. Like, I teach my kids coping skills. I'm like, things are not gonna work out the way you want them to, right? Like, how are you gonna cope with that rejection, with that disappointment? Are you going to find someone, attach to them, and then use sex as a way to fill a void, right? Are you gonna use drugs as a way to fill a void? Or alcohol, or just partying, or whatever. These are things that just, you're reckless with your body. And so I think that as women, if we empower our girls, right, to say, hey, yeah, that sucks. Your parents are jerks. You don't want to be home, right? And that's the truth. Like, as a young girl, you will cling to your teenage boyfriend because you don't want to be home, right? Or you will go out and you will give your body away because you don't understand the value of the way your body moves, right? And so you squander it as if it's worth nothing because your sense of self hasn't really been established. So I think that maybe if we just stop worrying about how it works, right, and how to be protected, it's like, maybe that's not even an option for how you cope with disappointment or sadness or loneliness or depression. Maybe we teach other things, like, hey, people use sex, have sex for whatever, even in a marriage. You have sex to get away. Sometimes you have sex to shut your partner up, right? Sometimes it's true. Sometimes you have sex just because I like it? you want to get something, or you want to end an argument or start an argument. Like, we use it for all these different things, but maybe if we change it up a bit and have it less be, you don't want to get pregnant, and more of, do you really want to give your body to this person who you honestly, if you ask yourself, isn't really worth it? Like, this person's a liar. This person's a cheater. This person's no good, but he gives you something that you don't have. And so you're going to give your body away? I don't know. I just feel like maybe if we change it up, maybe that would do something.
I like what you're saying, right? And I respect what you're saying. Let me say that. I respect what you're saying. And I think, all of us will probably have a different perspective, on what those encounters, look like and feel like for all of us. I think there are definitely truths in what you're saying, but I feel like, it's more emotionally based, right? In my opinion, I feel like it's more emotionally based, and you're right. If we don't start teaching at a younger age, right, those coping mechanisms or those triggers, and allowing them to have a different outlet, right? Teaching them that there are other things that they can do, right, to rather feel loved or comfort or find that safe space, or this is my person type conversation, right? I think that we've all been there, right? Like, I assume, right? Like, we've all been there or whatever, but I am an advocate for educating, right? And from whatever level or whatever source that may be, we as women have to empower our younger people with the right information, right? Despite how it makes them feel, right? They need to know, right, those pros and cons. They need to understand the pros and the cons, and the only way that they get that is through the education behind sex, regardless what the vessel of the information or where it's coming from. I am a hard advocate for that. If we are silent about it, our kids will make bad choices, they will relive the mistakes of our mistakes, right? Things that we did when we were coming up, rather we had support or not, right? Every household is different. Every demographic is different. Every religion teaches it in a different way, you know? And I think that regardless of the lessons, the safe space has to be there. The forum has to be put out there for them to be able to have those safe spaces.
I agree. I know you wanted to speak.
Oh,
Yes.
we got it.
Hey everyone, my name is Mariana. So just my belief system on, you know, the overall starting of the sex education, you have to be the change that you would like to see. Everybody want change, but don't nobody want to say, hey, I'm the change. Meaning get on your platforms, utilize your platform, speak in on it. Any opportunity you have, speak to a crowd of young women. It's not just about these conversations here, it's about what we do when we leave here. So I feel like people perish due to the lack of knowledge, you know. A lot of things are in books that's hidden and people don't even pick up a book and read, not even 6 months throughout the year. So encouraging people to read more. And then most important, like she said, it starts at home. So I come from a family of 13 siblings. I have 7 brothers and 6 sisters. I'm the 4th youngest of the pack. So it was one of the type of things where sex education was not taught. And I'm being honest.
Right.
Sex education was taught to me my freshman year of college. And I went to school here, Mount Pleasant High School in Wilmington, Delaware, and I went to college in the South. So it's one of the type of things, why am I not learning until I get to college? And with that being said, I am a product of abortion. And I'm gonna be very completely transparent with y'all because I got pregnant in high school. And I knew for a fact I wasn't in the headspace to have a child, and the person that it was my high school sweetheart that I ended up getting pregnant by, he was like, you know, this is not the time for me. So it was one of the type of things where as a child, I didn't know what to do. I was scared to tell my mom. And I didn't tell my mom until the last week it was time for me to get rid of that child. And the baby was developed. It was just like very like mentally like just disheartening. But one of the things about it is you gotta give yourself extended grace.
Right.
I feel like we overlook the fact that we're on this earth for the first time. We're here to learn. This is a university. And it's one of the type of things where people act like they already been here before, like they already know what's best for you. And no, it's one day at a time. You have to ease yourself into this information. And like I said, the fact that I am a product of what I am a product of, I do my due diligence in making sure I utilize my platform. So I am a social media influencer where I go on YouTube, I go on Instagram, I'm on TikTok, and I'm not necessarily just talking about sex. I'm talking about things that people need to hear that's going to reawaken their mind, because I feel like our mind is like a polarity. It's on or it's off. A lot of people's minds are off. A lot of people are programmed. A programming system is the agenda. At the age of 7, a lot of people are programmed to whatever they're brought up around, that's all they know. So in order to unlearn these bad habits and to relearn good habits, we have to be circle of influence. Who are we talking to? Who are we hang around every single day that's gonna make or break our future? The saying is, if you hang around 6 millionaires, you become the 7th millionaire. If you hang around 6 freaky bums, you're gonna be the 7th freaky bum. So it's just a state of mindfulness. I'm being honest. Look, we talk about reproductive, be honest here. This is a conversation where, like I said, I talk like this wherever I go.
Right.
So it's not like a new thing for me.
Right.
So I'm telling, like, we have to be honest with ourselves, be honest with the people we hanging around with, and know for a fact that it's not for everybody to get this information. But if you do get this information, it's an assignment for you to change the world around you and change within yourself, because it starts within, internal healing.
Yeah.
And then you can project it on the outside.
Right.
I tell people, when there's no enemy on the inside, the enemy on the outside could do us no harm. So when we're not at war with ourselves about our past hurts, our past setbacks, and our past defeats, we could be able to get through to the next person, letting people know that, you know, I once was this, but now look at me. And that's how change happens.
Right.
Showing people better than you could tell them. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I love
Me
it's
too.
our assignment, right?
Yes.
And
Right.
yes, it's our assignment, and I love that. I think moving forward, I'm still in that Miss Influencer, just so you know, right? But I agree with that. I think that the lessons are available. We just got to keep pushing them out there, right? Like, and we have to be those vessels to push that information forward.
My name is Nikita. I'm a lot of things. I went to school originally to study sociology and women's studies. Those are both of my degrees. And then I went back to school to become a holistic nutritionist, and I now currently own an apothecary and a vegan restaurant. So that's my background. I think it's important to note so you can see kind of my perspective. But I want to swing it back to legislation, and I'm gonna keep this real common sense. To me, if you have never had a uterus, you should not be speaking on women's issues.
Talk about it.
That's just how I feel.
Point
You
blank
don't,
period.
you cannot begin to make decisions on my uterus or anyone else's until you've had one. So
That's right.
even if it comes to a point where I have to run myself, it's just coming to a point where we're having people make decisions that don't have to make the choices that we have to make. So from that perspective, I start there. And as a part of having the conversation, I remember two things about sex when I was growing up. One, my first question to my mother, and probably first and last, was, "Mom, what's a sperm?" That's what I asked her. And her response to me was like, "Where did you get that from? Like, what do you know?" And my mom's a reverend. I think that's important to note. And eventually, we had a very brief conversation, and she said, sex is not really all that. Like, she just kind of brushed it off as it's not important. And to some, that may have been the incorrect answer, but for me, it was important enough to keep me for a very long time. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things in American society specifically is we are very over-sexualized. Mm-hmm. Everything is about sex, but it was something about my mom's response that sex really wasn't, whatever. And because my mom has always been an honorable woman, she was the change that you wanted to see in the world. My aunt was a virgin until she was married. Not to say that that's the way, but that's just what my examples were. Mm-hmm. I didn't grow up thinking that sex was so important. I didn't think it was the end all be all. I didn't think it was a big deal. I just thought there were bigger fish to fry. So it was just kind of like, okay, I understand that all the girls are having these conversations and talking about how good it is, but my mother's not gonna lie to me. If it was all it was cracked up to be, she would have told me, So I think one of the things is kind of trying not to make it this big deal. There's just so many more important things out there. And one of the things my mom established very early was my relationship with God. And I just feel like starting with some type of relationship, or even if it's a relationship with the universe or whatever powers that be that you believe in, I think establishing that love for self and that love for God is kind of a big deal. So when you're talking about sex, start with your relationship with self and your relationship with God. And then also approach sex from a holistic perspective. You said you were a nurse practitioner, and I just feel like let's look at things from every perspective. How does sex affect the body on a mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual level? And then, allow them to make the decision. And I would respect whatever decision my child decides, hopefully not a child, but teenager or older, decides to make, as long as they have all the information. And I really think less is about anatomy, because how much does it really affect the anatomy as much as it affects our emotional state and our spiritual state? And if we kind of sit in the spiritual and emotional of sexual conversations, I think that will have a better and more informative impact. But yeah, let's get these guys to stop making decisions about us.
That's right.
I like it, and I appreciate the perspective. Thank you.
Did you have a comment?
Yeah, absolutely. First off, my name's Tabitha. I am also an educator, so very similar backgrounds there. So I want to talk about two things, because I think that the original question that you brought up is really about two different things. It's about knowledge and access.
Yeah.
So the first part is really what we've really been digging into tonight, which is the knowledge piece. I like a lot of the things that you guys have been saying this evening about that. I do agree that it does start at home. However, I also agree that not everyone's home is going to be the same, and there is a lack of equality when it comes to what kind of information we're exposed to. So I do feel when it comes to knowledge, we have to kind of balance with both sides. Respecting the family, but also making sure that everyone is given access to the same type of knowledge so that they can make informed choices about their own body. Whether it be that sex is important, not important, whether it be I'm going to dedicate myself to people who are worth it, or I'm going to use my body in the way that I want to use my body. But without knowledge, you're not making good choices. And I think that that's really the key here. Mm-hmm. So with Planned Parenthood, we're really opening up that access part. So the knowledge really comes from home, and and then these educational places, organizations. But what Planned Parenthood offers for everyone is the opportunity to get the health care for their body that they need.
Yeah.
Now, most people think that Planned Parenthood is strictly like this sexually based organization. And while it does offer a lot of those services, I think that it's a broader branch of healthcare than people really give it credit for. And I think we have to recognize that in a lot of communities, people don't have access to the types of healthcare they need. And that's where Planned Parenthood also comes in. So I think we're really discussing these two different aspects of this topic. And I think it's important to ensure that women have access to the care they need. While it is safe here in Delaware, it is not safe here in Delaware, because the reality is, if you go to an OBGYN or a doctor to get your health care, you are likely to look at months wait before you can actually see someone. And if you need emergency care, you might have to go to a different state even. In fact, I have a friend whose daughter had to have an abortion before she went to college. They live here in Delaware, could not find a provider to give her the service that she needed here in Delaware, and had to go to New Jersey. They live here where it is safe. So the reality is, you are not safe even in where you think you are safe. And ultimately, I think what it comes down to is women need to band together. We need to make communities where we can educate each other on our bodies and our choices and the things that we can do, so that we can educate each other on where the access is. And in addition, if things start to disappear, then we need to kick it old school, because back in the day, there were women who had the ingredients needed to treat the things that we needed to be treated, and it became its own secret network. They called us witches, but guess what? We use nature to solve our problems, and we need to get back to that kind of community with each other.
I appreciate your perspective. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
I think a lot of what you said is what I've been thinking about, especially like talking about marginalized communities. Like, I'm kind of fearful with this new administration and like people, because me growing up like in the hood, I feel like we don't have access to a lot of things. So coming from New York, even though it's a blue state and, you know, we just voted against all the craziness that Trump is trying to do, I think that for less fortunate people and people who don't have access to those type of things, it's like, it's a scary time for them. So like, what do they do? You know what I'm saying? I don't know. I feel like you said, we need to come together as women, especially like, for example, like in South Korea, you know, how they are, the 4B movement, they were trying to, well, they did actually. They were banning sex, banning dating, banning having children. Not saying that we have to be as extreme, but something of those policies I think would really help us here in America, just coming together.
I don't know if I want to have Chinese policies on me. Like, that's not what I want, right? Like,
not
I'm
necessarily
ready.
all of that, but you know what I mean? Like, just as far as like coming together and sticking together. That's like the point I'm trying to.
I think sometimes there is a fine line, because, and that's why I kind of had to start my own practice, and I didn't introduce my name. I'm Valeria Muhammad, so I'm owner of Empower Her Health Wellness, where I specialize in balancing women's hormones. So I started my own private practice and kind of got out of the rat race, because I want to empower women to have their own personal choice. In primary care, one of the things that I was faced with, now imagine me, a mother. I can't give your child Tylenol without your permission, but I can put an IUD in your child without your permission.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Right? I can give your child birth control pills. I can do whatever you want without your permission as a parent. Because at 13, your child can walk into my office, I can put an IUD, neural plant in her arm without your permission. You don't have to know. And I'm like, this is horrible. But no, that's the law. I can also sign papers in Pennsylvania for Plan B. That's Plan B, over and over again. on call. I'm on call over and over again. Can you prescribe me Plan B? What do you mean, can I prescribe you Plan B? Oh, the condom broke. Listen, you need to go on some type of birth control. Oh, I don't want to do that. That's hormone. Well, what do you think Plan B is? Over and over again. I need you to go on birth control. I don't want to go on birth control. You prescribe me Plan B. This is same patient. That problem. You need to put on a condom. I don't want a condom. Plan B. Then the other issue. Oh, can you sign these papers for me to get an abortion? What do you mean sign a paper for you to get an abortion? Oh, I don't want to have this baby. I'm going to commit suicide. What are you talking about? Pennsylvania. Because they don't want to pay for an abortion, but they know they can use their medical insurance to get an abortion if they feel like this baby is going to be detrimental to their health. Are you serious? You're telling me that you might be suicidal? Yes, because they don't want to pay for an abortion. So now as a primary caregiver, I have to sign these papers. Oh, I might have been, what do you mean you might have been raped? This is what goes on in Pennsylvania. So do you see how people teeter and totter with the law because they know their medical insurance, Medicaid, will pay for their abortion because they don't have the money to pay for abortion. They don't want to pay for abortion. But paperwork will say, if you have these 3 things happen to you, you don't feel like you can mentally handle the baby, I can sign a paper as a provider and you can get an abortion. So this is how people can teeter around to get abortions. This is how I can give your child an IUD without your permission, but I can't give them Tylenol. So this is the other side of the medical side that you don't know about, where I'm like, I can't do this. Like morally, like I can put an IUD in your daughter and you don't know? And I think you and I would have had a problem. Yeah, like, and I'm like, I'm just being realistic, right? But like you and I would have had a problem. But it happens all day, every day, because you can do that. You can absolutely, your daughter can walk out with birth control pills all day, every day. We do it all day, every day. It happens at Westside Family Health, Henrietta Johnson. I'll tell you where it all happens all day, every day without your permission.
It happens at Mount. My children went to Mount, and my daughter could go and get birth control. But I wanna flip the conversation into something else. That this is not about sex. This is about power. Right. The same way that rape is not about sex. All of this, you don't have a uterus, you're making decisions, is to put women back in their place. Yes. And as long as women, we don't come together, then it's going to continue to happen. So we could talk all day long. We shoulda, coulda, woulda. If was a fifth, we'd all be drunk. So what I'm saying is,
that's so old school. I love it.
Yes. And so you look at what's happening, that women aren't coming together. I mean, everything was on the line, and you still see women still voted for dysfunction. They voted against gender to choose race, and we still have this issue. It's not going to change until, unfortunately, something has to happen for women to come together. But it's embedded in the fabric of how women are crafted. Right. Now that I mean a societal construct. The societal construct is, do what I say. When our incoming president stood and said, I'm going to protect women whether they like it or not, he was making a statement. When got up there and said, Daddy's home, you're going to get a spanking, he was making a statement. So I just wrote this book about black women and white women coming together. White women were crafted with this document called the Witch Hammer. Black women were crafted with this document called Let's Make a Slave. And so it's psychologically embedded in us to move towards what the man says. Now look at the religious construct. You can have a woman pastor or a man pastor, and women feel more comfortable with the man. That is how we got this current administration, because it wasn't about right or wrong. It was, who are you more comfortable with leading, him or her? They're more comfortable with him because that is the social construct, that's the religious construct, and unfortunately, you got these girls in church being molested by the pastor, by their father, being told, like, think about how we as women are so entitled here. When we were in Afghanistan for 20 years, those Afghan women went to school, they had jobs. As soon as the Taliban came back, guess where they went? In the house. They can't talk outside, they can't be outside. And they're trying to fight against that as women. And here we are in the United States, and we can't come together. It's not about sex. It's not about none of that. It's about power. It's saying we are in control, and we don't want you to say anything about what we're saying.
Right. I agree with that. I think that, like, and even talking about the girls, and I have a daughter, and so I feel the pain of moms who don't maybe want their children to be on birth control. But also, you know, the narrative is we as women need to empower each other, right? Like, why doesn't your daughter feel comfortable coming to you, talking about the fact that she's having sex, or maybe she did get raped or molested by a pastor or a brother or cousin or Indian chief, and she feels some type of way about it? Like, the question should be, okay, what's going on? Like, why don't you feel why don't you feel comfortable talking about what happened to you, right? Talking about what's going on in your life, and you just want to solve it. You need to get an abortion. You need to, like, take care of this because you don't feel like maybe you have a community. I don't know. But I feel like the core I never feel like it's the in output, right? It's always something else. And if we don't stop and really come together as women and figure out how we can continue to empower ourselves as a united front and stop controlling our girls, right? We're controlling our little girls, telling them, do what as I say, not what I do. And then we're upset when they don't know how to speak up for themselves. We're upset when, how did you let yourself get molested? Why didn't you say something? Well, you told me to shut up. You didn't make me feel comfortable. You didn't make me feel empowered when I came to you and I told you that something was wrong. Or you were so involved in your own stuff that you didn't even see me when it shifted. Because you can see your girls when it shifts. Like, you know when something's off. If you're in tune, you know when something's off. So either you don't have the gumption or the know-it-all or the words to say what it is. But I agree, sex is just the output. All that stuff is just the output. What is the core? And I agree also, why did Roe versus Wade happen in the first place? Because women were coming together, right? And they were using hangers and ODing on stuff and doing all these extreme measures to abort because they didn't have the power to go to medical providers and do it. And now that we have that, we're taking it away. I'm glad that it's now up to the states to decide if they're going to adopt any type of Planned Parenthood or things like that. And so as women, we need to make sure the state of Delaware, outside of whoever is on the federal level, but that the state of Delaware, that we are advocates in the state of Delaware, that our people, our leaders in our state are knowing what we want as women. Right? Because we can't control what other states do. My girlfriend lives in Texas, and I told her, look, I got plan B, like, what's good? Like, you know, I provide it for you if you need it, you know? But she's in Texas. Like, what is she gonna do? Like, so you know, it's a real thing.
Yes. I'm really happy you brought that up because I really want to touch more on Roe versus Wade, But we're gonna take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll dive more into it.
Looking for a reliable and efficient way to travel around Delaware? DART has a variety of routes and schedules to meet your needs, providing service in Newcastle, Kent, and Sussex counties. Whether you are commuting to work or exploring the sights and sounds of the state, our fleet of buses are well maintained, equipped with modern amenities. Public transportation is the greener alternative. Plan your trip today. Download our transit apps or visit dartfirststate.com.
If you're a woman that needs help and needs some wraparound services, we at the Delaware Health Equity Coalition, Dr. Sydney Teal, Dr. Velma Scantleberry, and myself, we'd be more than happy to see you. We are located right in 19802 on Boehner Boulevard. See you soon.
Okay, thank you. Welcome back. So we were touching on Roe versus Wade, so I want to jump and dive back into that a little deeper. So for many of us, Roe versus Wade was a symbol of freedom and empowerment. Women fought for it, and they gave us autonomy over our bodies, our futures, and our families. But now the dismantling of this landmark decision threatens to undo decades of progress. The Supreme Court overturning Roe versus Wade 2 years ago set a precedent for states to ban or severely restrict abortion access. This decision had led to many states rolling back reproductive rights. More than 6 in 10 men, 62%, and 2/3 of women, 66%, say abortion should be legal in all or most cases. So for those of you who lived through Roe versus Wade, how did the decision shape your life and choices at that time? And how do you feel about the decision being overturned? And then my third part question would be, how do you feel about 2025 and what does that look like for your families, women in your life, future grandchildren, daughters?
I'm scared. I'm scared, and I felt violated. I felt violated. You know, I am plus 50, right? And to live through my generations knowing that I had full autonomy. Like, I made the choices for me when I thought that they were best for me, right? I didn't have to go to a panel of men and have a conversation to say, hey, here's what happened to me, right? And this is a choice, right, that I want to make for me. I'm out, right? Now, I feel oppressed. That's how I feel. I feel oppressed. I feel disrespected. I feel like the choices that were once mine are no longer mine. And I need permission to do anything with me that I want to do for me. I don't like it. I don't like it. I think it's ugly. I think it's about power. And how do I explain this now, right, to my granddaughters? How do I say to them, here are choices, right, that you now have to be aware of. These are the things that you now have to tighten up. Here are the things, the lessons that I now have to teach you because somebody else is dictating these choices for you. So here are the things that I need you to be prepared for. Here are the things that you must stay vigilant and mindful about. Like, these aren't just, you know, stop and frisk conversations. These are ongoing conversations that I now have to continuously have. My daughters have to continuously have as the mothers, but I'm scared, right? Like, at my age, what is being created? What is being created for them?
And I think one of the ladies touched on it earlier when they were saying that they're putting us back, that they're taking our power. And I feel like for me, I feel like I'm just now being able to make decisions for myself. So the fact that, like Nikita was saying, that we have men who don't have uterus or can't relate to anything that we go through.
How dare you?
Yes, actually, how dare you?
How dare you?
Exactly. So
Can I just say that for the other side of this conversation, women drop the ball.
I agree.
Men can only do what we allow them to do. And so when women fought for Roe versus Wade, then women should have continued the fight to make sure that girls weren't using abortions as birth control, that girls understood what their bodies meant. All the things that we've been saying, women drop the ball. Men can only do what we allow them to do. So had we done the work we were supposed to do, we wouldn't be in this position. But because we didn't do what we were supposed to do, I'm 50 plus, right? So my mother was, you know, she had rights, Roe versus Wade. I had Roe versus Wade. What were we doing in the meantime that we allowed it to get to this place? And we have to take ownership that my generation dropped the ball. My mother's generation dropped the ball. So we could talk all day long. Why are you talking about my uterus? Where were we? The same way they took prayer out of school. Where were church folks saying, don't do that? We was in the church praying while she was taking prayer out of the school. And so where were women when they were taking our rights away? We was doing our own thing. And so I think part of this is we got to take some accountability for the fact that we allowed it to get to this point. And we have to do something about that.
Okay, but I would also say that, look, I actually don't believe in being a one platform vote, right? Like, however, when I was 18 and 24, 22 and all that, it was. Like, I voted strictly on whether or not they were going to go and overturn Roe v. Wade, because it did matter to me. And it did. So all women aren't at fault here. Like, I'm just saying,
As a collective, I'm not saying each individual woman. I'm just saying, as women, we have to take accountability for what we did as a sisterhood and what we didn't do. Because if we were doing what we were supposed to do, their age would have been like, oh no, I'm not going to allow it to get to this. All I'm saying is, there's always two sides of the story. And we can't keep saying, I don't know how we got to this point, and not face the truth that as women, as a collective, we dropped the ball.
There is accountability there. There is accountability there, and and I'm with you, Kendall. I think that the ones that did their job, that's great, but I'm also with you. Like, as a collective, right? We didn't holistically come together and bond properly, right? To make sure that those protective layers stayed in place, right? even the new administration coming in, right? For whatever side you voted for, your rights are your rights, your decisions are your own, your choices are your own.
Yep.
But there was a lot on the ballot. There was a lot on the ballot for women to be afraid of. For women to be afraid of. I'm not talking about Bitcoin, pensions, who's giving up more money, where is it coming from? Because there's always a debt to pay for the fruits that they give in the beginning, right? There's a debt to be paid regardless what they give us, but collectively. And we talk about this, right? And we'll continue to have these small forum conversations, but how do we come together? And I think that is the bigger question. Yeah. How do we come together? Right. When do we rip off the Band-Aid and say, all right, our complacency has gotten old.
That's right.
How do we fix it?
How do we move forward?
How do we move forward, right? Like every one of us has said pretty much the same thing in a different way. How do we come to the table with solution-based conversation, right?
That's right.
I could blame my ancestors, I could blame my generation, and I can say, oh my God, our 20-year-olds right now didn't come and stand up. They didn't do their job, right? I don't want to do that. I don't want to continue to do that. I want to know where the solutions coming from. How do we open up the conversation? Where's the forums that starts the solution-based conversations? We broke some stuff. How do we begin to fix it?
I think you start with the economy. Honestly, at the end of the day, this is America, and if you have a choice, no matter if you're literally choosing from like Hitler or not, if you have a choice between capitalism and women's rights, everyone's going to pick capitalism. So statistically, that is just a reality. If the economy is bad and you run on economy and say, I'm going to fix the economy, you're going to win over women's rights. People could care less about women's rights. I'm just here to tell you that. And then you have to realize that there are also women that are over 50 that don't necessarily have to really worry about abortion rights. They just don't. And then there's also a percentage of people who are gay and they don't, they're not getting abortions. So it's just like, to me, the strategy was imperfect because if I was to, let's say I'm in that person's shoes, is like, I already know that people don't care about women. This is a misogynistic country. So I can't really be like, oh my God, it didn't work out. Yeah. It was kind of like, you ran on women's rights. It's like women running on black issues. Like, it's not gonna happen. This is America, right? So I think that was the first problem. And secondly, I just feel like, as far as solutions are concerned, because here we are now, it's just about this. It's like let's start with having the actual conversation about healthcare, and then starting the conversation in our, what is that called? Mid-level elections. Demanding certain things from, was it midterm?
Midterms.
Yeah. Midterm elections, and having those conversations with the people that affect the change actually in our state.
Yep. Yeah.
And that's something that I am going to do.
Right.
I want to start going to these meetings, and I want to start having those conversations, especially like I said, now that I'm considering having a child within the next couple of years. It's like, I want to know where you guys stand, and then I'll go to Maryland and ask where they stand and all the nearby states, because that's what's going to matter most to me. My last thing is actually not a point, it's a question, because I don't actually understand this. What is the issue with Roe v. Wade? Because what is the concern? Like, okay, we're having too many abortions. Because from what I understand from the VP, the future VP, is the issue is that we're not focused enough on family, and that, too many abortions is happening and things of that nature. And my thing is, if you want to modify and have people have safer sex, or it's just other and better ways to do it than abolishing Roe v. Wade, which circles back to it's probably about power, because it can't be it just 1 + 1 is not equaling 2. So
right.
There are more white women having abortions than black women.
Absolutely.
Because they can afford it.
Yeah, I love your perspective, and I agree. And I will tell you that DETV as a whole, those elections, right? That mid-level of that's where it's important, right? That's where it's super important, and that's the message that we were trying to get out to people. In order for us to make change, it doesn't happen when you're voting for the president. That's not when it happens. It happens when you're voting in that lower level election, right?
All the things.
All the things that matter, all the things that affect us moving forward to the next administration. That's when it matters.
So what's the start? Like, what is there a meeting that happens every month? Is there what's the beginning of this? Because I think if you make it very layman's terms, instead of saying, okay, mid-level election, when is mid-level election? Or the second thing, are there city council meetings? Who is your city council person? Say the city council person making that announcement. The city council person for Wilmington is this, or Newcastle is this, and they meet on this date and at this time. And to me, if you're really about that life, you show up. I know I'll be there.
It's making the information accessible, right? And we've been saying that it's all about accessibility, right? It's about having accessibility to the information, right? Go ahead. Yeah.
So there's been a lot of talk going around. So a lot of different things have been talked about, but I do believe there is power in community. So I 100% agree with you. I don't think we should blame anyone for what's happened. I think, once again, a lot of it comes back to being knowledgeable about things that are happening in your local elections and in the spaces around you. And we do need to start figuring out how we can come together. And social media is a great platform for building those communities and getting that information out to people, but people also have to be willing to show up. And I think that's the part where it becomes difficult. Yes, we all showed up here tonight, but then how do we go out and get other people to show up?
That's right.
And I think the other thing we need to think about is the root of this. And to me, the root of this is actually a question that I want to ask. And that is, when do we start to trust our girls to make decisions for themselves?
Exactly. I totally agree with that. I don't think that, this was a challenge for me as a mom, because how I was raised was, you kind of you don't really talk, right? Like the parents have their conversations, the children have their conversations, you do as I say. But I'm like, what if I don't want my daughter to feel like she doesn't have a voice, right? I don't want my daughter to ask a question about her body to her girlfriends, right? Like, I want her to feel comfortable talking to myself, because you know what? I'm your mom, right? And I've been having my things for a long time. You're just starting, So, and I told her straight up, I'm like, look, it's good to have girl talk with your girlfriends, right? But no, you guys are all at the same level, and your hormones are everywhere, and you really don't know what the hell you're talking about. So another perspective is maybe bring in the moms, right? Bring in the aunties, have the conversation. And so I'll start it with her, and I'll say, oh my goodness, this time of the month, this is what happened. Do you crave this, whatever? So I open it up with me being vulnerable, and then that in turn has given her a time to be vulnerable. But I started talking to my daughter, not even about sex and all that stuff, but just about her body. Right? Like when she was 10 years old, when I started realizing that she started changing or looking at herself differently, and then when she started developing. But then when it comes to Roe v. Wade, and this is a challenge, it's we do show up as a community when there's a harm done, period, right? If there's no harm done, there's no foul, right? Like Black Lives Matter was a big thing in our community the same time that the decision was being made for Roe v. Wade.
Distraction.
It wasn't a distraction. It was not a distraction. It was a reality that was happening in our community. And we all came together and we saw what was happening with Black Lives Matter. And we all came together, and there were policies that were changed on all levels. Now that that harm is mitigated and no one's talking about it as much, we see a lot of these policies dismantling and so forth. So I think that when it comes to people's awareness of the harm that was done and why Roe v. Wade went all the way up to the Supreme Court. It started on the state level, but so much harm was done across the country that it went up to the Supreme Court. Of the hundreds of thousands of cases that are asked to go to the Supreme Court, only a handful were actually heard. And this was one of them. I don't think that we dropped the ball. I just think maybe it was a distraction, but I just think the priority wasn't there at the time. So I think the priority will come when young girls start realizing in states that don't have abortion rights or Planned Parenthood or things like that access, and they figure out different ways to get done what they need to get done. Because old girl, she's going to find them pills, right? Like she's going to find a way to fix her problem. Whether she tells our moms or aunties about it or not, she's going to find a way. And is it safer for us to give her the education that she needs to find the right way that's safe, so we don't find her bled out on a corner because she went to some false doctor and they jacked her up? Like, That's the harm that was done.
I appreciate and I appreciate your perspective, but I am not a conspiracy theorist, right? That is not who I am. But there is nothing that a person could tell me to say that Roe versus Wade wasn't calculated. And there is nothing that a person could tell me that we weren't focused on the right thing, right? There was too many things happening at one time, right? And depending on where you were in your life, what you believed in at the time, your focus was here. There are so many times where I say to my kids, stop listening to the noise. Stop listening to the noise and pay attention to everything that is happening around you. Focus, because you're getting lost in the wrong message. Then you turn around and now our liberties have been removed and you didn't even know that it was happening because you were paying attention to the noise.
But I feel like that's unfair, right? Like there was a lot going on.
There was a lot going on.
And how can you focus on one thing? You know, like there's a lot going on. So I don't feel like the focus was off. I just feel like
the focus was where they wanted it. It wasn't that.
The
focus was where they wanted it to be. The focus was where they wanted it to be. So if I have to sacrifice a few for the many, I'm going to sacrifice a few for the many. If I have your attention, I'm going to keep it because you're not paying attention to the real things that are happening over here. And it is so easy for us to get lost in the messages, in the social media, in the trap. It is important to pay attention, block out the noise, just sit still sometime. Sit still and really pay attention. Read, educate yourself on all of the things that, and we're not going to catch it all. We can't catch it all. But in a community of women, somebody's going to say it. Somebody's going to bring that attention up. And now our focus is going to shift.
I know. There was a lot of abortions. And I have to say, you're right, that we do have to take a lot of accountability for that. It's heartbreaking how many people have had abortions and used it for birth control. White women, black women, a lot of women. Because we had the statistics as healthcare providers to show why that became such an issue. And we were educating and on campaigns telling women, stop using abortions for birth controls. That actually happened. It was tragedy. It was a tragedy how many abortions were used for birth control, particularly in the Black community. It was horrendous. And I mean, the truth is the truth. To where we were doing a lot of education to stop it. And it was really, it was sad. And it wasn't that it was lack of access, because birth control pills were free. No charge, no copay. You could get them. And we were on campaigns doing that before I was even a nurse practitioner, for years trying to get women to take birth controls in a lot of different communities in Philly, in Jersey, and in Delaware, because that's what we were doing a lot of. But it was too many people were getting abortions, and it was very bad. So that was a lot what was going on, where they were talking about abortions, and we got to face the fact it was happening. Yeah. In a lot of communities, women were just...
As Medicaid was paying for it.
And Medicaid was paying for it.
Funding. Yeah.
Funding.
Yeah, right.
So that was one thing, that was just something that I have to... Because I was on those campaigns.
I appreciate that.
But I was going to say something as far to my daughter. My daughter never came to me, and I was the most open parent there was. So I conspiracy plan. They don't talk to us. As much as an open parent, I went to my niece, who was 10 years younger than me. I knew everything, every little step my daughter made, because she had a perfect relationship with my daughter. Communicated with her. I would tell my niece what to tell my daughter, and I was totally okay with it. Right. Tell her to tell her this, tell her to do this, tell her to do this, everything. Right. So I think the lines of communication are beautiful. Yeah. I think we start and like we said, we start with our local, with any legislation as the bodies, because to tell someone who was raped, if you ever worked in a rape kit in the ER, working with someone who don't report right away, and they have to find out they're pregnant because people are scared. They go to these college parties and they don't tell anyone and they can't have an abortion. To work with someone who's been raped by a family member and they're scared to tell someone and they have to carry a baby to term, it's unbelievable. So I think we just start with the local and be on these lower level elections. I don't know if it's lower level, but state and federal and county elections.
Local, state. Well, actually, school board.
School board.
Like everybody here. So we're gonna wrap it up, but I'm gonna say, here's what we're doing next. We're gonna find out who's running for the school board. We're gonna vote. Then we're gonna find out who's running in the local elections. We're gonna vote. State elections, we're gonna vote. And federal elections, we're gonna vote. That's how we do it. That's how we do.
Oh my gosh, this conversation was so good. It's getting heated up. I'm so sorry we are running out of time, but we will definitely have another. I feel like we should do a part 2 maybe.
Oh, this definitely needs a part 2. And I'm hoping from this conversation that you ladies share it, you know, what we talked about here tonight. So that way when we come back and say, hey guys, our choices, right? Our body, our choices part 2. Like, I want to see the room fill. I want to see us all come together because you've had a conversation, and so on and so on and so forth, that we can't continue to have these conversations alone, right? So DETV, her perspective, every woman, we want to talk to every woman. We want all of our perspectives out there, right? They don't have to be the same. We just have to respect the different views. Right? But the message can resonate as long as we're doing it together. Right? So I'm excited about part 2. Like, this was getting so good. Like, oh my God. You guys, I appreciate all of the perspectives. It was amazing.
So thank you, ladies, for spending time with us as we wrapped up season 1. Remember, the fight for our rights doesn't stop here. It's just the beginning. Stay loud, stay proud, and we'll catch you next year on season 2 of Every Woman. Take care.
I need like 3 cookies after that.